So some caveats of polyvagal theory. The polyvagal theory was really founded on the premise that we can see things in animal studies with physiological um, awareness about the body and how it responds to both safety and danger. Applying that to human models has been a little tricky. Points to consider when thinking about whether or not to buy into something, right? There's people who criticize polyvagal theory and Stephen Porges and some of his ideas, and I want to make sure that those are voiced, that you know about those as we go into it. I posted something on my LinkedIn about polyvagal about a year ago, and if you see Grossman up there on the right column, was challenging some of the things that Porges came up with. He actually responded to me on LinkedIn that was like, here's my research on some of the things of why polyvagal might be wrong. Porges addressed these in his book and labeled them as misattributions, or they're saying the same thing, but maybe framing it a little bit differently. I don't think Grossman would see it that way, but here's where Porges in his book is trying to call attention to that and set it straight. So what is a theory? It's a supposition or system of ideas intended to explain something. And so we're going to be talking about how to explain or make sense of polyvagal theory in the scope of counseling. And I think Porges has done a wonderful job of being able to develop the idea of polyvagal theory. And he wanted to get traction in obstetrics, neonatology, pediatrics, cardiology, and other medical specialties. But really, Deb Dana has stepped into this really neat place of taking a lot of his work and making it fit for a therapist. So much of the work that you'll see out there is by Deb Dana, and I'll be referencing her throughout the book. And Stephen Porges and Deb Dana have worked together to make this very usable for therapists, right? So let's talk about the historical views on the autonomic nervous system and how it works. So the autonomic nervous system, when I think about that, I often think of Hans Selye. If you remember him, he's the father of stress. And, you know, there's good stress, eustress, and there's distress, the bad stress. And stress is described as an organism's physiological response to perceived stressful events in the environment. So he developed, if you remember, GAS, the general adaptation syndrome. It's an event that threatens an organism's well-being, which is also referred to as a stressor, and it leads to 3 stages of bodily response. One of those is alarm, another is resistance, and the third is exhaustion. So the alarm phase moving into a sympathetic response, the resistance of trying to bring ourselves back into homeostasis, where we start to have that curve back down and pause, and then exhaustion of just having the experience of both of those systems working, trying to keep us in balance or in homeostasis. So remember that there are different systems at play as we're thinking about the gas system. The HPA axis is involved with the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenals, right? And so there's the CRF, corticotropin releasing factor, that binds to receptors on the pituitary, which then cause a release of the ACTH, which is the adrenocorticopic hormone, to the kidney, and then the kidneys release cortisol. And if you're like me, I've always read books that say, you know, cortisol is a stress hormone, and you always think of cortisol as being this bad, terrible boogeyman. We want to like lower cortisol levels at all costs. Well, the interesting thing is cortisol actually serves us well in some cases, and this goes back to homeostasis. The cortisol is going to help us be motivated, energized, and charged up for the day. This is a picture of, I had some work done. This is actually done through a spit test, so the saliva test. To be a little bit more eloquent here, so it's the saliva test, that my cortisol levels should be in that green area there. Even in the yellow is fine too. But you can see where I was flat. I started off with no cortisol at the beginning of the day when I woke up. It didn't get any better by noon. And by the evening, it was tanked. So I was exhausted. for the longest time and didn't know why. And I think this is important to mention for several reasons, but one being, as therapists, we're thinking about the different types of therapy that will help clients, but we also want to think about the whole client. So the biopsychosocial model comes into play. How do you make the bio model work for you instead of working against it or not with it at all? I don't think many people work against the bio model, but maybe they don't willingly participate in the biological piece of their clients functioning in concert with a primary care physician, right? But a lot of primary care physicians don't get into tests like this. I had to go to a special naturopath that would do this type of test for me. To come to find out, it's something that in my kidneys, I need to release more of the hormone cortisol. And so I was able to get a supplement for that, which then brings that number back up. But that is going to then help in therapy, right? If we're working together with the doctors. So be sure to, just a reminder, be working with physicians as you can and get release and paperwork to have those conversations with doctors that can be really helpful for your clients. So 3 organizing principles of polyvagal theory: neuroception, co-regulation, and hierarchy. And there's not a whole lot I want to say about that right now. It's just it's just an overview slide. So what is communication? And we do communication well in clinical training programs. I teach for Indiana Wesleyan. I teach in the grad counseling department, and knowing the right thing to do is emphasized, and we need to be able to show that in tests and so forth, and our formative evaluations. But being is less often taught. And so both of those things are anecdotal. I don't have literature to support that. I can't say, according to Smith and Jones 2022, that this is being emphasized. But I can tell you, as a professor, we emphasize knowledge and reading books and being able to come to the table and talk about things and conceptualize and do all of these great things. But when it comes to playing the video recording, I'm calling myself out on the carpet here, right? Like, I need to be able to make sure that the therapist that in training is being in the session with the client. And that is shown in the literature to be a healing part of the relationship, right? The being part. And so making sure that my students know what communication is, it's sending energy and information to someone else. We do this not just by talking, which talking it's fascinating to me. You take these signals in the air, and your brain receives them and it makes meaning out of them. Like talking is fascinating. Being, as we're going to talk about when we get into co-regulation, is just as important, if not more. So it's possible to say all the right things but miss the mark with being. And so I think, especially as people in a CE program that you are, it's easy to regress to the mean, back to where you were before you started in your skills when it comes to being. So SIFT, SIFT isn't on here, but I think sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts, important verbiage for clients.